Welcome back to Cycle's tutorial. We are creating a control panel app using Angular and Firebase. In this episode, we are going to set up Cloud Function and Firestore and fetch administrator list. If you are new to the channel, hit the subscribe button to get more videos like this. In the last episode, we added one user from administrator dashboard, but we were not able to fetch list of users since client SDK of Firebase does not support fetching list of authenticated users. So what we are going to do, we'll use Cloud Function and use admin SDK to get list of users, and Firestore we will use to store user informations so that we can directly communicate with the Firestore and fetch list of users. So let's set it up. We can see the Cloud Firestore dashboard. We created a control panel 21 database where we will store the data in terms of collections and documents. Firestore works in a different way. You guys let me know if you want a dedicated video on Cloud Firestore. Let me create a collection named users and add a field, and we have to use a document ID. Let's save it, and this will be the structure when we add a new user. From Cloud Function, we will add few more fields in users collection. For now, let me delete the collection. You have to put the name, confirm. Next, we have to install Firebase CLI tool. Let's go to browser and search for Firebase tools from GitHub. We can copy the command and let's execute this command in terminal so that it installs globally. Once installed, you have to log into your Firebase account. It will prompt you for login. Select your Google account, allow it. Login is successful. Now we can see list of Firebase projects using this Firebase project command. From here, you have to select the project ID and you have to execute Firebase use your project ID. This will help to set Control Panel 21 app to set as default project. Though we have Firebase.json in our app, we still can reinitialize Firebase. Firebase init, yes, we want to proceed. From the list, we have to select all the services. Here we are going to select Firestore, function, hosting, and storage. Let's press enter. To keep default file names, we can simply press enter. Enter. For Firebase function, we are going to use TypeScript. Yes, we want ESLint. And here we go. We have this functions directory, and in this directory we have package.json. So let's install all the dependencies now. And what will be the public directory? So this will be the compiled Angular code, which usually is dist/control panel. We can go to Angular.json, copy the output path and put it here. Yes, our page is single page application. We don't want GitHub CI/CD now. Let's select no. Let's press enter. Done. That was so easy, and our Cloud Function environment is ready. It's time to create our first Cloud Function. The function execution starts from index.ts, and in package.json you will see Firebase admin, which is actually the Firebase admin SDK. In index.ts, we are going to add authentication event handler. We can find that from Google Firebase auth events. Let's copy the event from Firebase documentation and put it here, and let's export this as onCreateHandler. Once we deploy this Cloud Function, you will see this function name and the handler in the Cloud console. In user object, we have several properties like email, display name, UID, and these properties we are going to store in Firestore. Now let's create a firebase.ts file where we can initialize the Firebase admin SDK and export Firestore object. Let's import all as admin, then admin.initialize app to initialize the SDK, then export const db equal to admin.firestore. Now this db we can import in our index.ts file to perform Firestore operations. So db dot collection, here we have to give the collection name, which is users, then add. In add function we have to pass the user object, where you can pass email, display name, and definitely the UID, which is the unique ID of the user used in Firebase authentication. Let's chain it by then function. Once it is successful, you can definitely console log success, then catch block to track if there is any error, console log failed. And it is a good practice to keep the whole block within try catch console log of the error. Yeah, so that's it. We are ready to use this cloud function, but before that we have to deploy. And before deploying, let's comment out this line in ESLint to avoid some ESLint errors. Firebase deploy functions. Once we start executing this command, first it will run ESLint to check if there is any error. Then it will transpile the TypeScript before deployment. A successfully deployed function you can see in Firebase console. The function deployment is complete now. If we see the console, we can see the function name and the event user.create. That means whenever a new user is authenticated, onCreate handler will be triggered. Now let's check this from our app. We can use the same user, saikat@gmail.com. Let's delete the user and use it from here. Success. And in authentication we can see the user, and in the Firestore we can see the user record has been stored. We don't have display name for now. Later part of time we can add display name. Now these records we can access from our app using client SDK, which we already have integrated, Angular Firestore. Here in our administrator page we can create a table and display list of administrators. Now let's focus on our Angular coding part. In SRC feature admin administrator, we have to add material table to show list of administrators. Let's open material table documentation. We need to add the module, material table module, in shared module. And here under shared module, we are going to store all the domain object mappings. We call it model. So in user model, we can define the user object, email, display name, UID, whatever you want. Now let's create a service which will actually communicate with Firestore to fetch the data. So shared services user, and now let's open the service file. Here we have to use Angular Firestore service. Let's open the documentation. From here we can get the import statement. Let's use this import statement. Let's use Angular Firestore in the constructor. Using this service, we can create a reference to the collection. Let's copy the code segment and use it here. Also, let's declare the collection reference. We can rename it to user model that we already have created, rename the collection. And here we need to pass the collection name, users. Let's create a service function, get all users. Using this function, we can connect to Firestore Whenever there is a change in user collection, it will stream the data to our application. We are using map to parse the Firestore data and will create an array of user objects. Using map, we can iterate through all the returned user objects and create a custom data model. Now we can store the ID also. This ID is the document ID, not the UID we have seen. We need to create another model to store that type of data. Let's name it just user. Here we will have ID and the user model. Now let's return user type of data from get all users function, ID, then user model as user. For better readability, let's indent this to 4 spaces. We can put this in single line and also remove these curly brackets because it will be a return statement. Now in administrator component, let's create a function to call the service get all users. Let's add the service in constructor. Using the service, let's call get all users dot subscribe, and in turn we'll get list of users, and we have to call get all users from ng on init. In Firestore, we have to add some rules to access the data from app. So read is allowed if we are authenticated. Same goes for write. Let's put these in 2 different lines. We need to deploy this Firebase rule. Firebase deploy only Firestore rules. Next, we have to populate administrator table. We can copy the code from here and put it in our HTML. Displayed columns and data source we need to define in our component class. We can also copy from here and change it later. Let's move get all users call from ng on init to constructor, and in get all users function we can point data source to users array. Let's define data source as users array at the beginning. Let's check the browser console. So we can see the array of users. We have to map email and UID. We don't need these 2 columns. Email we can use in the first column. User model dot email. Same for UID. User model dot UID, and the column name is UID. Let's add some style. We can expand the width to 100% and give some margin in the top 20 pixel. Now let's see in the browser. We can see a table containing user record coming from Firestore. Now let's try to add another user, Saikat2, give some password. Let's add it. So instantly it will be saved to Firestore and the result will be displayed in the table. In next episode, we will perform edit and delete operation. That's it for today. See you on next video. Thanks guys.